Good morning, guys. This is going to be part 3 of domain and range, and this is notes 1.05. And today we're going to figure out how to find the slope of a function, in other words, a graph, right, over a specified domain. And so the words that we want to remember from previous lessons is for sure domain, right? That's the one from the most recent lesson, and domain, if you remember, represents all the x values, and slope represents rise over run. So for slope, I'm going to try and color code things. So I'm going to say, when I'm talking about slope, we're going to think of a fraction, and I want you to think of rise over run. So I use red for run. So when we think about slope, we're going to think of rise divided by run. Okay. So let's keep reading here. It says nonlinear and piecewise functions. Piecewise functions, we just want to think of them as a graph that's composed of pieces. So if we look at this graph, right, it looks like they got a bunch of lines, pieces of lines together, and glued them together to make these kind of peaks and valleys, right? And if you notice throughout this graph here, there's different slopes. What it means by that is, right, there's different places where the graph increases, then it decreases, then it increases and decreases. So this is what it means by different slopes. And it's at different locations, like it says here. And so let's see, how do we find the slope of a particular section of the graph? So this is our graph, and the instructions say find the slope of the graph on the interval -4 to 0. So this is the slope. And remember, what I want you to remember for the slope is a fraction where the top value represents how much I'm rising, and the bottom value represents how much I'm running. Actually, let me change the color here. Slope. Okay. And then this interval here represents domain. And so if you remember from last class, we talked about domain. It represents all the x values. And we usually said, a starting x value and a stopping x value. So it wants us to start at -4 and stop at 0. And remember from the last lesson, I would use a kind of a vertical line so that I can scan through the graph, right? So we're going to scan from left to right, but we only want to focus on from -4 to 0. From -4 to 0. Okay. Now, what's happening on the graph from -4 to 0? Well, we see that the graph is going up. But is it only going up? Is it only rising? No, it's also running, right? So we want to figure out how much is it rising or running. So in other words, if this is my starting point and this is my ending point, and I want to go along these x values, well, at -4 the graph is over here, At 0, the graph is over here. So how do I get there? How do I get from point A to B? Well, I'm going to rise and run. And so let's see, how far do I have to rise? And how far do I have to run? Okay, so let's count. Let's see, from here to here is 4 units. And then from here to here is another 4. So I'm going to say the rise over here is 8. I went up 8 units, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then I'm going to run how many units? Well, this looks like a -4, so how many steps from here to here? 4. 4. So what's the slope? Well, the slope, remember we use the symbol m. Slope is equal to rise over run. So how much did I rise? 8. How much did I run? 4. 8 divided by 4 equal to 2. That's my answer. Okay. So they gave us a domain. This is, a starting point and an ending point on the x-axis. And we want to know, what direction is the graph going, right? It's going at an angle, but to get from A to B, put A to B, we have to follow a particular direction, right? We have to go 8 steps up and 4 to the right. Okay. Let's go over to the next example. And just to clarify, this is the same graph as on the other side of the page. I just wanted to copy it over here so that we have the same graph to look at. Okay. And let's see what the next example is asking for. Okay, looks like the same type of question. It's asking, what is the slope? And remember, slope is rise divided by run. And we want to know, what is the slope of the graph on the interval from 10 to 12. So these are the x value, or the domain, right? So where is negative, I keep saying negative, where is 10 to 12? Well, on the x-axis, where is 10 to 12? It's from 10 to 12. So this is a starting and stopping point. So I'm just going to highlight that on my graph. Okay. Remember from last lesson, we would take this and we would kind of scan it. And we want to scan from 10 to 12. 10 to 12. And we want to focus on what's happening to the graph, right? Would you say that from 10 to 12, would you say that the graph is decreasing or increasing, right? We see that the graph is going downward, so I would say it's decreasing. But I just wanted to see if we can notice that as we work out the problem. And so we want to find the slope. We want to find, how do I get from point A, this point right here, to point B? So I have a new starting point and a new stopping point. But how do I get from one location to the other? I have to follow the slope somehow, right? So remember when we were talking about slope, if we have a starting point and an ending point, How do I get there? Well, rise over run, right? So here we have to go down, and then we have to go to the right. So my slope is equal to, how many steps did we take to get to go down to B, right? So we're at 0 here. So how far is it from here to here, this blue path? How far is that? It looks like if I look at the y-axis, I went down 4 steps. So I'm going to put -4 because I went down 4. And then what about the red path? How far is it from this red to this red? How far is it? Well, from 10 to 12, I know it's 2 units, 2 steps. So my slope is -4 over 2, which is equal to -4 divided by 2 is -2. Awesome. All right. You can pause the video here because I'm going to erase some of the stuff that I wrote so that I can use the same picture for the for the next question. So I'm going to erase some of my scratch work here. Okay. All right. Now let's look at question C. Now the question changes here. It's kind of like you want to think of that they're flipping the question around. Now they're asking us, what's the interval where the graph has a slope of -2? So if they're asking about intervals, we want to think of domain. And so we want to think of that they're asking for x values. So it's asking for what x values does the graph have a slope of -2? Okay, so then we're looking for one thing about slope is we got a slope of -2 in the previous answer, and when we have a negative slope, we say that the line is decreasing, right? So I'm going to color code or highlight the parts of the graph that I believe have a slope of -2. In other words, the parts of the graph that are decreasing. The parts of the graph that are decreasing. So I'll color them in purple for this one. Okay, so you might say, well, this part of the graph looks like it's decreasing. This other part over here looks like it's decreasing, and this part looks like it's decreasing. So I have 3 parts on the graph that are decreasing. But the question is, do those parts have a slope of -2? How can I make sure of that? Well, to go from one point to the next point, if I'm looking at these purple lines that I drew, let's look at the first purple line. To go from this point to this point, what's my rise and my run? Well, it looks like my rise here is -4, or I'm going down -4, and then to go from 0 to 2, it's 2 steps, right? Is that a slope of -2? Yeah, -4 divided by 2, -2. All right, check, right? Now, let's check the second purple line. How far is it from this point to this point? Oh, sorry. How far is it from this point to this purple point over here? So What's the rise, what's the run? So the rise looks like it's 4 plus 4 steps. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 steps, and I'm going down 8 steps. So I'm going to put -8. And then how far to the right? What's the length of this red piece? Well, what's the distance from 4 to 8? What's the distance from 4 to 8? Because that's how wide this gap is. Well, it's a distance of 4. And what is -8 divided by 4? -2. Okay. And then the last piece, this piece, I want to figure out again, how far am I going down and how far am I going to the right? Well, here this blue length looks like, if I compare it to the x-axis, the y-axis, it looks like it went down 4 steps, 4 units. And then it went to the right 2 units, because from 10 to 12 is 2. And what's -4 divided by 2? -2. So these 3 purple pieces of the graph all have the same slope of -2. -4 divided by 2 is -2, -8 divided by 4 is -2, and -4 divided by 2 is -2. But what is it asking me in the question? It says, on what intervals are these pieces located, right? These purple pieces. On what intervals? And remember, we're talking about x values. X values, keep that in mind. Domain, x values. So remember, we would, in the previous lesson, we would scan, right? And so what x values am I considering from this purple piece to this, from the beginning of this purple piece to the end? It looks like from 0 to 2. So I'm going to put from 0, comma to 2. Sorry, not comma. From 0 to 2. And do we put bracket or parentheses? Well, we put a bracket because the whole graph, this whole graph is closed and it's continuous. It said in the beginning that we're covering continuous functions. So everything's closed, so we're going to have brackets. Now, how many purple pieces do we have? Right, we have 3 purple pieces, so we need to keep going. So we just got from this piece, this starting piece to this ending piece. Then where does the next purple piece start? It starts over here. So I'm going to put union. And where does the second purple piece start? It looks like it's at 4, comma, where does it end? So I'm going to scan, and it looks like that purple piece ends at 8. 8 bracket. So from here to here. Okay. And let's look at the next purple piece. Where does that purple piece start? It looks like it starts at 10. And then it goes to 12. So from 10 to 12 on the x-axis, from 10 to 12. So I'm going to put union bracket 10 to 12. Okay. So again, you can pause the video here because I am going to erase all this just to go over the last example. But notice, right, we had how many pieces that were decreasing? 1, 2, 3 purple pieces. So how many intervals did we have? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So depending on how many pieces of the graph that you're looking at, that's how many intervals of domain we're going to have. All right. So again, you can pause the video. I'm just going to erase all the scratch work that I did on the graph so that I can do the last example. Okay. Let's look at the last example. So let me zoom out a little bit more. Okay, so the last example, D looks like almost the same word for word question as C, but what's the difference? Well, they changed the slope. It's a positive 2, so positive, it's talking about increasing. And we're interested in the interval, so the x values, the domain, right? And so for the last example, we're looking for the pieces that are increasing. So that's why I erased like my previous notations, because we're looking at it in a different viewpoint, right? So I'm looking for the increasing pieces. So I'm going to highlight those in purple again, but I feel like this piece, for example, is increasing, right? It's going upward. This piece is also increasing right here. And this piece. And these are the 3 pieces that I feel that are increasing. And do they have a slope of 2? Do they have a slope of 2? Well, let's check. Remember, slope is rise over run. Rise over run. So if I want to go from this, let's look at the first purple piece. If I want to go from this point to this point, from the bottom to the top, how do I get there? Well, I have to go up and then go to the right. Oh. There we go. I go up and to the right. Well, how many steps does it look like this blue piece is? How long is this blue region? Well, it looks like it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it looks like 8 steps up. And since we're going up, I'm going to keep it positive, right? Because we're going, let me put an arrow even, right? Since we're going up, it's a positive 8. And then how many steps to the right? Well, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 steps to the right. And remember, slope is rise over run. So what is 8 divided by 4? 8 divided by 4. That's 2. Okay, so we're good there. All right, now let's look at the second purple piece. How do I get from one part to the next part? Well, I have to go up, and then I go to the right. I have to go up and to the right. Okay, so how far up did I have to go? It looks like 4, because there was a negative 4 here. sorry, not negative. There's a 4 here. So it looks like I had to go up 4 steps. And then how far is it? How long is this red piece? Well, it's from 2 to 4. So it's a distance of 2. And what's 4 divided by 2? What's 4 divided by 2? It's 2. All right. So far we have these 2 pieces have the same slope. All right, now the last piece. I have to go up and then to the right. But how long is this blue piece? Well, it goes from -4 to 0, so that's 4 steps. So put a 4 there. And then how long is the red piece? Looks like it goes from 8 to 10, right? So that's 2 units, 2 steps away, right? And what's 4 divided by 2? It's 4 divided by 2. That's also a slope of 2. Awesome. So these 3 pieces have a slope of 2. Now, what's the domain of those purple pieces? Well, remember, for a domain, we would draw a vertical line and scan, right? So where does this purple piece start and where does it end? What x values? Well, it starts at -4. And I'm going to put a bracket because it's closed here, the beginning of the graph. And then I'm scanning, I'm still hitting the purple line, I'm hitting the purple line up to when I get to 0. So it's going to be comma 0. Close bracket because it's closed. But is this the only purple piece? No, right? There's another purple piece right here. So let's keep going. Where does the next purple piece start? What x value? It looks like it starts at 2. So I'm going to put union because we're starting a new piece of the graph, and that new piece starts at 2, comma, where does it end? It looks like it goes all the way to +4. Bracket. And then we have one more piece. So I'm going to put a union, and let's look at the last piece. So the last piece starts at, I wrote over it, right, but it starts at 8, and it goes all the way to 10. So it starts at 8, and it goes all the way to 10. So I'm going to put bracket 8, comma 10. All right, and so that brings us to the end of our examples. And again, feel free to rewind, fast forward. I always suggest, going through it and testing out the problems, trying to see if you can do it before I get to it, and then you can check yourself with the video. But this one's not as long as the one before. But again, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time in my next video. Have a great day, guys.